If it was up to the people that actually go to elections and wear the suits and you see on TV, they'd probably make a deal tomorrow. I don't know where you're getting this perception that Iran is stronger. Iran has no navy left. They've lost a substantial percentage of their defense industrial base. That Iran has lost a substantial percentage of their missile launchers, and their economy is far worse today, and I mean far worse today than it was 6 to 9 months ago. And they are looking at hundreds of billions of dollars of reconstruction costs just to get to where they were 6 months ago.
Mr. Rubio, you keep telling us how we're winning this war. The president keeps saying,
well, the war's over
completely annihilated. The war is not over.
As much as it pains me to admit this, Senator Cory Booker is 100% correct. The war is not over. And what you heard from Secretary of State Marco Rubio in essentially declaring that the war against Iran is over was not only a lie, it was a statement that he made on the same day the war against Iran escalated, because as the United States continues attacking Iran, especially near the Strait of Hormuz, Iran has had enough and they've decided to strike back. And they did so by targeting Gulf countries that currently host US military bases. So I'm going to kind of go through what we know in regard to Iran strikes. Laughably, both the United States and Iran still maintain that there is a ceasefire, however fragile it might be. But before I give you the details on what happened last night, let me just be very clear that the meaning of words mean nothing at this point, because a ceasefire, pretty self-explanatory in the word itself, you cease fire. But the Israelification of US foreign policy has made it so we don't abide by ceasefires, just like Israel doesn't abide by ceasefire. So ceasefire doesn't have any real meaning at this point. But with that in mind, why don't we take some B-roll of the footage of the aftermath of one of the Iranian strikes. You're actually looking at the aftermath of an Iranian strike on the Kuwait International Airport. Kuwait's military said that the strikes hit a terminal and killed at least one person. I mean, the death toll is low for now, considering the fact that this looks pretty bad. 63 others were reportedly wounded. And this does mark the first Iranian attack against a Gulf country since the IRGC and Washington agreed to a ceasefire on April 8th. Now, since then, we have read about strikes that the US has carried out against Iran near the Strait of Hormuz or at Qeshm Island. But it appears that the strikes that the US had carried out recently is what gave Iran the motivation to attack its Gulf neighbors. So this doesn't mean that Iran broke the ceasefire. I want to be clear about that as well, because if you read legacy media or corporate media right now, the way that they frame this makes it appear as though Iran is the one that broke the ceasefire, and so they're in the wrong and we should go back to an all-out war. But remember, one of the terms of the ceasefire actually happened to be the ongoing offensive that Israel is carrying out in Lebanon. Now, in announcing the ceasefire deal, President Donald Trump initially said, yes, Lebanon is part of this ceasefire deal. So Israel must stop attacking Lebanon in order for us to move forward. Israel never stopped attacking Lebanon. And so Iran has had enough. Okay, enough. We're not going to allow this to stand. Now, the US blockade, by the way, of the Strait of Hormuz, which was the US response to Iran blocking the Strait of Hormuz, is also an act of war. And that was implemented and carried out through this so-called ceasefire. So that in and of itself was a violation of the ceasefire carried out by the United States. The United States also, again, struck Iran near the Strait of Hormuz and bombed Qeshm Island. So Iran decided to respond and said, no more hit and runs, essentially. No more tit without a tat. Okay, so they're striking back. Things seem relatively calm today, although obviously the situation is fragile and can change at any moment. And according to The Guardian, the latest exchange of fire began when CENTCOM said it targeted a tanker, the Botswana-flagged MT Lexi, on Tuesday. CENTCOM said an aircraft fired a missile to disable the tanker's engine as it passed through international waters toward Iran's Karg Island near Kuwait. Now, I don't know if Trump has any idea what he's doing. And to be quite frank, I'm not sure when the US military decides to strike on a vessel leaving the Iranian ports, because make no mistake about it. I mean, over the weekend, there was a 24-hour period in which 28 vessels transited freely through the Strait of Hormuz, and each one of them paid the $2 million toll that Iran is now charging. So I believe that in some instances, this is just my speculation. I don't have evidence to back this up, so I want to be clear. But my speculation is Trump understands the absolute devastation the closure of the Strait of Hormuz is going to lead to, or already has led to, when it comes to the global economy. Remember, 20% of the world's oil and gas supply transits through the Strait of Hormuz. A third of the world's fertilizer, which farmers need to grow food, transits through the Strait of Hormuz. So not allowing any ships to pass, I mean, we would be in an even worse situation than we are in right now. And the situation we are in right now is bad enough. It's already pretty bad, and things are set to get worse. So there's a little more to get to. So you have, this Botswana flagged tanker attacked by the United States, and the IRGC responded to that. And they said in a statement late last night, the aggressive US military struck an Iranian oil tanker near the Strait of Hormuz with an aerial projectile, causing damage to the tanker's engine room. These responses should serve as a lesson. So Iran responded with drone strikes on a passenger terminal at Kuwait's airport. They also struck Bahrain.
Starting something new is terrifying. When we launched our Shop TYT store, I was drowning in what ifs. What if no one buys anything? What if the site looks amateurish? I almost talked myself out of it, but I took the leap anyway, and I'm glad I did, because Shopify made it incredibly easy to turn those what ifs into real sales. Shopify is the commerce platform powering millions of businesses globally. Get a load of this, it handles 10% of all US e-commerce. That's amazing. It's behind brands like Allbirds, Gymshark, and yep, our very own Shop TYT. They give you one all-in-one dashboard for inventory, payments, and analytics, so you're not juggling 10 different logins. Need product descriptions? Shopify's AI tools crank out copy and even polish your photos, and mine needs polishing. And if you get stuck, their 24/7 support team has your back. So if you got an idea for a business or a side hustle, stop what-ifing. It's time to turn those what-ifs into with Shopify today. Sign up for your $1 per month trial at shopify.com/TYT. Go to shopify.com/TYT. That's shopify.com/TYT.
A statement from Iran's foreign ministry blamed Kuwait and Bahrain for the attacks, condemning what it called the colonialist use by the United States of the territory and infrastructure of countries in the region to advance its aggressive plans against Iran. And there is a strategic reason, aside from retaliating against the United States, that is motivating these Iranian attacks against these Gulf countries. We've talked about it before, but just as a reminder, the whole idea is to discourage these Gulf countries from continuing their hosting of these US military bases. Iran wants the US out of the region. And to be quite frank, I think that we have quite a few incentives to leave the region. But it's incredibly difficult to do when one of our so-called allies is Israel, is in the region and uses and abuses our military for their own advantage on a regular basis. So we'll see what happens with these Gulf allies, but what they have realized, certainly through how this war has been carried out and how the US has responded to Iranians and their attacks against them, is that the US is not there for them when they need them for security. And the whole idea of hosting these bases in the first place is because these Gulf allies were under the assumption that the US would provide a security umbrella of some sort. But that hasn't been the case. Now, CENTCOM has denied that any of Iran's strikes have actually have been carried out successfully. Video evidence would prove otherwise. But here's more of what we know. In total, in Kuwait, Iran struck an aircraft shelter at the Ali Al Shalem Air Base in Kuwait, a drone/helicopter shelter at the US camp Buring. So that's either destroyed or has been severely damaged. And then several warehouses at the US camp Buring appeared to have been damaged as well. Now, Kuwait's defense ministry spokesperson, very upset about this for obvious reasons. They don't like being attacked. He described the attack as criminal Iranian aggression, which resulted in significant material damage to the building and injuries. By the way, how is CENTCOM going to respond to that? They keep denying that Iran succeeded in their attacks. Clearly, there's a contradiction here with what Kuwait is saying. Kuwait also ordered a reduction in Iranian embassy staff, declared 2 Iranian diplomats persona non grata, and gave them 24 hours to leave the country. So these Iranian diplomats have been expelled from Kuwait in retaliation for the Iranian strikes against, these sites in Kuwait, including that airport. So when it comes to Bahrain, another country, Gulf country that was attacked by the IRGC, well, Iran struck the US Fifth Fleet headquarters in Bahrain and multiple helicopter bases. And that in particular was denied by CENTCOM. But again, there is video evidence proving that did in fact happen. Iran also struck Jordan, northern Iraq, the UAE, and the Al Udeid air base in Qatar, along with, although we don't really know the full extent of damage from those particular strikes. And as soon as we learn, of course, I'll tell you more. But Mohsen Razeh, who is the Supreme Leader's military advisor, has threatened more strikes. And he did so in an X post. He says that every shot fired and every attack will be met with a deluge of missiles and drones. The aggressor will swiftly be punished. And guys, one other thing that I wanted to note, I've said this before, but it bears repeating. For all the fear mongering that we hear from our media and our government in regard to Iran, Iran poses such a threat, such a risk to the United States. There's a reason why Iran isn't trying to strike the United States. It's because they don't have the capability to do it. They've never had the capability to do it. Iran has never been a threat to US national security. Maybe you can make an argument that they've launched cyber wars or something like that. But as it pertains to conventional warfare, we're talking missiles, we're talking nukes, things like that. They don't have the capability. They don't have the capacity to do it. The only way they're able to retaliate against the United States is to strike US bases in these Gulf countries or strike the Gulf countries that host these US bases. And that's what they've been doing. And, that's the reality of the situation. We should not have gotten caught up in this war, which has provided absolutely no benefit whatsoever to the American people. But we have already spent tens of billions of dollars on this war, which has only made our quality of life worse by driving up gas prices, which in turn will absolutely increase inflation in other sectors of the economy. There are also signs that the war is going to escalate. There were signs that the war is going to escalate over the weekend, okay? So if you're paying attention to news over the weekend, you might have noticed that Tehran responded to US forces hitting an Iranian radar and drone site. So they responded by targeting a military base in Kuwait that it claimed was involved in that US operation. But here's something else that's really important. What about boots on the ground? Because that's something that people paying attention are very concerned about. I, as an American, am very concerned about. I do not want our soldiers to risk their lives by invading Iran and engaging in a war on the ground. And luckily, Trump was asked a question about that. Here's what he's thinking.
We have the strongest military in the world. Everybody knows it. You saw that with Venezuela. You see that with Iran. I mean, their navy's wiped out. Their air force is all gone. After 3 days, their military was virtually wiped out. Now I have to make a determination. Do we sign a deal or we do it the other way? And the other way is not nice.
What will the other way achieve, though?
Certainty. It would be over. I'd rather do it the nice way from a humanitarian standpoint.
Can you do it just with bombing? The other way?
You don't have to. We don't need boots on the ground now. Well, we did it. We wiped out much of their military with just bombing. We didn't put anybody on the ground. You don't want to do that. You're so far away. You don't want to do that if you can avoid it.
So I don't know whether you can really trust what Trump said at the tail end of that statement. No boots on the ground. How do you trust him? I mean, he has said so many things that he has then turned around and done the opposite of. At the same time, though, I do think that he is realizing maybe that there is no military option in ending this war, in getting the Strait of Hormuz open. There just isn't. And that's not based on me. I'm not a military expert, guys. I'm just a talk show host. But what I do is rely on the actual military experts. And I go out of my way to listen to military experts of all political stripes, including conservative military experts. Colonel Douglas McGregor is not a lefty. Colonel Daniel Davis, not a lefty. But what I find very fascinating is that they both, along with a whole host of other military experts I listen to, all agree. Joe Kent agrees. There is no military option to accomplish the objectives that Trump laid out in the beginning of this war. So the idea of putting boots on the ground would be stupid. Only the Israelis would want that because A, they're not risking IDF soldiers. It would be American soldiers. And B, if that operation fails to get them what they want, who cares? Who cares? They didn't lose their soldiers, but at least they tried something to see if they can get what they really want, which again is the toppling of the IRGC. Whether the IRGC is replaced with a different regime that's more favorable to Israel, or if Iran becomes a failed state, they don't care. So that's what's going on here, and I'm hoping that Trump's better angels, if they exist, are kind of dominating the narrative in his head so he doesn't make the mistake of putting boots on the ground. However, Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu of Israel said that Iran was playing with fire after the Kuwait attacks, and Trump could order a full-scale return to military action, he claims, if these negotiations fail. Now, Jeffrey Sachs, personal hero of mine, I absolutely love him. He does incredible work in the area of diplomacy. He's appeared at the UN many, many times throughout so many different conflicts. He is saying, like, we don't even really need a peace deal per se. I mean, Trump could just end it. Yeah, the Strait of Hormuz is now under the control of Iran, but you don't need to sign a peace deal in order to end what's happening right now. Just walk away. And then maybe later the US and Iran can engage in diplomatic talks without Netanyahu or the Israelis breathing down our necks to secure some sort of agreement, diplomatic deal when it comes to the Strait of Hormuz. Now, do I think that's going to happen? Of course not. So we're stuck in this weird war purgatory where we have no idea where we're going. It doesn't seem like the administration knows what they're doing. And the ultimate decider appears to be Benjamin Netanyahu. The Israelis know that the main sticking point, for instance, is that's preventing the peace deal is their continued occupation and bombardment, aerial bombardment of southern Lebanon. And Netanyahu insists on continuing that offensive campaign. On Tuesday, Lebanon's state-run national news agency reported that 30 Israeli strikes across the south. Near the city of Sidon, rescuers recovered the bodies of 6 members of the same family. This is not Hezbollah, folks. This ain't Hezbollah. That included 2 children and a woman. Lebanon also said an Israeli strike hit a location near Beirut on Wednesday. Remember, Trump was patting himself on the back for discouraging the Israelis from attacking Beirut. Well, today, Israel attacked Beirut. So you know where this is going. And then people will turn around and say, no. Israel doesn't control US foreign policy. No way. I mean, do those people have any credibility right now? Seriously. But anyway, that brings us to Axios's claims that Trump had this tense phone call with Benjamin Netanyahu in which he told the prime minister that he was effing crazy and that everyone hates him. Now, both parties have been asked about that phone call on the record. Both parties have responded to whether or not that conversation took place. Let's take a look.
Axios reported that you had a phone call with Bibi Netanyahu, the Prime Minister of Israel, in which you were angry with him. You said, "Are you effing crazy? What are you effing doing? I helped you stay out of jail." Is that true? Did you speak to him in those terms?
I did. I wouldn't say angry. I was a little bit perturbed at his constantly fighting with Lebanon. At some point I said, "Bibi, we got to stop this. We got to stop it."
President confirmed that he said you're effing crazy. How did you react to that? What really happened in that call?
Well, I'm not going to get into details of our conversations. We've had thousands, a lot of them. And if you think this is a crisis, you should be in some other conversations. But we've always found a way. We have so many agreements. We agree on the main things. We want to get Iran, the nuclear program in Iran, finished. We want to make sure that Iran doesn't pose a threat to Israel, to the Middle East, to America.
Did he say that you'd be in jail if not for me?
Look, I'm not going to get into the details, but he's been very vocal about the absurdity of this fake trial that I'm going through.
Benjamin Netanyahu continues to face prosecution for corruption, and that's not a fake trial. There are substantive and substantial allegations against him because he's a corrupt monster, along with a war criminal who should be in prison. But nonetheless, despite the fact that Israel has shown itself to be a genocidal rogue state, I find it rich that they would fearmonger about the nuclear capabilities of any country, much less a country that doesn't even have nuclear capabilities. But with that in mind, I don't really care about this, in my opinion, fake reporting about how Trump really told Netanyahu what's what. Because at the end of the day, what matters is who is driving, which country is driving US foreign policy. And it's very obviously Israel. We provide cover for their bad behavior left and right. And I want to show you the latest example of that. Secretary of State Marco Rubio was testifying before the House today, I believe, if I'm not mistaken, before Congress. And he was asked point blank, hey, what about Israel's clandestine nuclear weapons? Let's see what his response was.
Will you tell us, the Congress and the American people, whether Israel in fact possesses nuclear weapons?
That's a question that they've never acknowledged to have a nuclear program. People can have, as you know, in open source and other reporting, suspicions about what they possess. If we're speaking frankly, I think most of the world assesses that they do, but they've never acknowledged that publicly, and as a feature of our foreign policy for a variety of reasons, we don't discuss it in that way either.
Israel not only stole our nuclear secrets, Robert Maxwell did that. Candace Owens aired an allegation against Ben Shapiro's uncle, his father's brother, indicating that he had stolen nuclear material and sent it over to Israel. I don't know how true that is. I looked into it a little bit. There appears to be some reporting on it. What are we doing? Why are we providing cover for a clandestine nuclear program that exists because the country that has that nuclear program stole our nuclear secrets and potentially nuclear material? And that is the country that's dragging us into a war with a different country that doesn't have nuclear weapons, but we're supposed to be afraid of Iran's nuclear weapons. Okay, right.
Every time you ring the bell below, an angel gets his wings. Totally not true, but it does keep you updated on our live shows.